What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today I'm bringing you an updated tier list ranking for every NFL team's offseason so far. If you missed the first time I did this, it was basically just free agency. Obviously some more dominoes have fallen, and we have the NFL draft we can talk about, so I'll have that pop up somewhere on the screen. Back to the old one if you want to hear my thoughts more in depth about free agency. But today I'm updating that tier ranking, and I'll probably do it once again once we get closer to the NFL season on our doorstep, if you will. But before I get into the video, I want to say, if you're new to the channel, I've actually looked at my analytics, and about 88% of people who view my videos are not subscribed, which totally makes sense. I'm a small channel. But if you are new, like the content, I implore you to hit that subscribe button. It would help me out a ton. And if you like today's video, please hit that like button. That would also help me out a lot. And comment away down in the comment section. I want to hear your thoughts. Who's your favorite team? Why am I wrong on where I placed them where I did? Who am I underrating and who am I overrating based off of their free agency, their draft, trade, signings, everything of the sort. So, with all that taken care of, let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals first. In my offseason video, I had them in A, and I do like a lot of the free agent acquisitions. Obviously, you lose Hassan Reddick, but Marcus Golden's an okay replacement. Ultimately, Hassan Reddick was cheaper than we thought he'd be, but you didn't know that at the time. And then J.J. Watt, obviously a big-time addition, also like Malcolm Butler. Couldn't find a corner opposite him until you get to, players like Marco Wilson in the 4th round and Tay Gowan, who I am a huge fan of. They took him in the 6th round, so I think that's a steal. Additionally, when you look at this offense, I don't know if Larry Fitzgerald's coming back. That's still kind of an open door. But A.J. Green, I'm sure can be fine doing something similar. Maybe doing more work over the middle of the field. That's something that the Cardinals don't have. And additionally, in that role, 2nd round pick Rondale Moore makes a lot of sense to try to, take a lot of those Larry Fitzgerald bubble screen, those short underneath plays that have been drawn up for Fitz, but give it to somebody who runs a 4-2 and is super athletic and stop on the snap of a finger. So I do like the addition of Rondale Moore. Zaven Collins was kind of a weird pick in my opinion, but I think if this defense is what it looks like it should be on paper, it's very multiple. It can do a lot of different things. You have a hybrid linebacker safety in Isaiah Simmons. You have this inside linebacker edge rusher in Zaven Collins. Chandler Jones can kind of do some different things in regards to how and where he rushes from. J.J. Watt, you could put him out on the edge. He can rush from the interior. Overall, they have a lot of different players who can do a lot of different things. Budda Baker kind of encapsulates that more in the coverage to, in the box element, not much of a pass rusher. But I thought about putting this team down in B, but I'll keep them in A. I kind of talked myself into it. Again, I'm a huge Tay Gowan fan. I am betting on him getting significant playing time as a rookie and, making good on being a 6th round pick and then some. I think he's going to be somebody that by the year's end, we'll look back and say, why was he available in the 6th round? And that's going to be what I've been saying this whole time. So hopefully I'm right on that and get people to come around to my side. Next team we'll talk about, the Atlanta Falcons. This was a tricky one because in my offseason video, obviously I had them lower on the list just because they didn't have a ton of money to work with. And then they put together an okay draft. Nothing spectacular. I mean, Kyle Pitts is a dynamic playmaker, but now it feels like after June 1st, they're going to have to trade Julio Jones given their cap situation. And if you're going to bring in a weapon, I'd like to see everybody in the mix, not just get a weapon to replace one. Also, they didn't take an edge rusher till the 5th round. They didn't take a corner till day 3. That defense is still looking very bad. Dean Pease will help clean it up some just because he is a good defensive coordinator and a good football mind. But regardless, there's only so much you can really do. But nonetheless, this was still a solid draft class. I am intrigued by the Jalen Mayfield pick in the 3rd round. Think he can be somebody who can play as a high-level guard, kind of hide his pass protection weaknesses. I'll give him a C. I think they did okay. They didn't get a running back, so it looks like Michael Davis is the every down guy. Additionally, they didn't get a pass rusher. Didn't find any answers at corner. So I don't know. But that offense is gnarly, and I can't deny that. But we'll see what happens with Julio. And if they trade him, free up some money, I understand why they have to do it. And depending on the package, maybe they move up to B. I don't know. Depends on who the suitor is. Maybe if they got Stephon Gilmore from the Pats and, a deal where you get a cornerback on an expiring contract, New England's trying to get rid of him, you give New England an elite level wide receiver, could make some sense for both sides. In that case, maybe I move them up to B because they got a shutdown corner. I don't know. Right now, I'll put them in C. Then we get to the Baltimore Ravens, and man, you want to talk about a team who has dominated this offseason. I think they've done a fantastic job. Had them in B tier in the offseason. I think I think he got at least be A. I think they've done a fantastic job, right? Like, Orlando Brown didn't want to be there, and they turned him into a pretty good haul that turns into Odafe Owe as well as Rashad Bateman. That addresses their two biggest needs. Alejandro Villanueva, never played right tackle. He's a better pass protector than a run blocker, but it's also a scheme that makes it pretty advantageous to be a run blocker, just given a defense doesn't know who's getting the ball. Is it the actual ball carrier, or is it the QB, or if they have multiple halfbacks in the backfield? You know, that's what Baltimore does well, is they make defenses have to try to locate the ball, and by that point, you're getting clobbered by a 300-pound man. So I think Villanueva will be just fine in that spot. So they've addressed a lot of their biggest needs. They've gotten younger, and they put together a really strong supporting cast around Lamar Jackson. Also, Tylan Wallace is one of my favorite picks, especially considering, you know, where they got him with the 5th round. Absurd value. I think he's a starting wide receiver of the future for this team. So unfortunately, though, I'm a Steelers fan. It was a fantastic offseason for Baltimore. On to the Buffalo Bills. I think I'm gonna put them in A tier as well. Had a sound offseason. Brought back a lot of the group. You know, Matt Milano's back. Darrell Williams re-signed. John Feliciano. They could have continued to get better on the interior. Didn't find another outside corner opposite of Tre'Davious White. But then when you look at their draft class, and it's kind of like another team we'll talk about later, wink wink, that's going to be an S tier, but they just kind of did it on a more micro level. They prepared for the future, right? Like, so they took AJ Epineza last year, and they took Gregory Rousseau, another project edge rusher that has a very high ceiling. They also took Boogie Basham, who maybe a little bit higher floor, lower ceiling, but someone who could start right away. I actually really wouldn't be surprised. I know this team still has Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison, but if AJ Epineza and Boogie Basham end up being the starting DNs in that 4-3, I wouldn't be shocked at all. And then you relegate those older veterans to more rotational roles where their age is probably better suited. Those two guys could still be starters, but by the end of the year, I would expect them to be phased out with some of the younger option this team has. Also, Spencer Brown, good young right tackle who has all the boxes checked for what a Pro Bowl right tackle should look like. He's just not necessarily very refined, but now he gets to be just a backup, learn and improve over time. They really won't need him to be a starter until maybe his 3rd year in the league, which makes a ton of sense. That's how you plan for the future. And then Tommy Doyle's a really solid swing player. He can just play across the offensive line and fill in when injuries happen, because they are going to happen. So this team was their contender, and all they did was continue to improve the team now. Actually, really brought it back. They're in a lot of ways running it back, just like the team I mentioned that's going to be an S tier later on. Brought back the group, made some small improvements, some tweaks, saved some money, brought in some new faces that have very similar skill sets, i.e. Emmanuel Sanders coming in for John Brown. And they also made draft picks that help them stay competitive in the years down the line, right? Like when you have to eventually pay Josh Allen, you're going to have some rookie or edge rushers on rookie contracts, so they're not making a ton of money, so you still have some flexibility. Offensive linemen you can have on cheap contracts later on. So really do like the offseason the Bills have put together. Then for the Carolina Panthers, and it's another tough one. Given they had a pretty solid free agency, bring back Taylor Moton, and then of course the big deal you have to talk about is Sam Darnold, and what an interesting trade that was. They also traded Teddy Bridgewater, not much to talk about there. So Sam Darnold is the guy, and I have to give credit, especially with the selection of Terrence Marshall in the 2nd round. They have given Sam Darnold his best supporting cast he's ever had in his entire career. Additionally, they take J.C. Horn. Not a pick I was crazy about on draft night, but if this team does want to play more man press, be physical with their corners, J.C. Horn is the epitome of that. He is the exact definition of a man press specialist. Additionally, Troy Pride Jr. does that at a high level. You have Jeremy Chin going into his 2nd year, Derek Brown. I think you're going to get a big leap from a lot of those defensive players. Overall, I think this team did get better. I'll put them in B tier for right now. Obviously, this team would have been in a fantastic spot if they got Deshaun Watson and he'd have any of the legal issues he's in right now, or maybe if they somehow got Aaron Rodgers, they didn't make the Darnold move and they waited, or if they took Justin Fields, I'd probably put him up at least in A. So, regardless, I like what this team has done, and I think they did put together a good draft. I'm really kind of torn here. I could put them in A, but since we already have 3 teams in A, I'll put them in the high B. They call this the B+ spot. But let me know what you think about the Panthers offseason. Then the Chicago Bears. And you want to talk about a team who has made a rise. They were C tier in that offseason video. That draft single-handedly put them into A. Look, I'm still not blown away by what they did in the offseason. especially considering now they have big holes at tackle, right? They moved off from Charles Leno and Bobby Massey, which you had to do given the cap was going down, and they make a ton of money for being below average players. Leno maybe is average. But they also had to cut Will Fuller. Didn't really get a replacement unless you're counting Thomas Graham as somebody who, as a 6th-round pick, who I liked at the 6th round. I think he can be a starter, but I don't know about right away. Jalen Johnson you hope to have healthy. But franchise tagging Allen Robinson was the best thing they did, and it looked like they were going to be relying on Andy Dalton, which is why I had him in C tier. They were in a position where they were a QB away, and they just settled for Andy Dalton. And they brought back Allen Robinson, which really rubbed me the wrong way because I'm tired of Allen Robinson dealing with bum quarterbacks. But now, Andy Dalton still might be the starter week 1, but once the schedule's released and I know where the Bears' bye week is, whatever week is after their bye week, I'm anticipating Justin Fields to starter no later than that point. And someone who runs a 4.4, great athlete, can be used in design runs like Matt Nagy has used Mitch Trubisky, but an even better athlete, an even better runner in open space, strong arm, very accurate delivering the football. So Robinson, Mooney, got to think their stats are going to be moving upwards. Cole Kmet, second-year tight end, you feel good about what he could do. So overall, and then also we talk about the tackle spots. They move up and they take Tevin Jenkins. They didn't have to give up a whole lot for him for a guy that we considered more than likely going in the mid to no later than the late 1st round. He ends up falling into day 2, and the Bears are aggressive and go get their guy. I don't know about him playing left tackle, but I also think he's a fantastic scheme fit given he's a run-blocking beast, and he also has a high, learning curve to get better as a pass protector, and they're going to need him to be a better pass protector than he was in college, protecting the blind side of Justin Fields if he is indeed playing left tackle. But him as a run blocker for David Montgomery, Tariq Cohen, got Khalil Herbert late in the draft. I really did like what that team did in the draft and kind of buoyed up from what they did in the offseason. So actually, you know what? I'll put them in B tier. I'll be realistic here. They had a pretty rough offseason other than bringing back or a rough free agency other than bringing back Allen Robinson, in my opinion. But the draft really did save this team, and it, you just saw, nearly put them into A tier. On to the Cincinnati Bengals. I think this team did a lot of things right. Had them in B tier in the offseason vid, and I think they had a really solid draft, addressed a lot of different areas of need. I'll put them in A tier. It's tough to battle because I'm thinking about maybe putting them in B tier because they had a lot of holes. It's easy to address a team like the Bengals because you need to get better everywhere. Same thing you can say about the Jets and the Jags, who, all teams who had a lot of money to spend and a high draft capital, right? Like, it's easy to fix those teams. But I think they also did a really good job and got a lot of really good talent, right? Trey Hendrickson, I'm not entirely sold on as a Carl Lawson replacement. This is a team that really has struggled with edge rushing production. Think about when they traded Carlos Dunlap, all of a sudden he quadrupled his sack total in, a third of a season basically in Seattle compared to what he did in Cincy. So I don't know what they're trying to do on the defensive side, but they just overall need to get better at scheming up pass rushing wins and sacks maybe, or they just need to get more talent there. Maybe Trey Hendrickson is that guy, but bringing in Mike Hilton, the best slot corner in football, you can blitz him, you can do a lot of different things. And then you look at the draft, right? You get an elite pass catcher, wide receiver 1 in Jamar Chase. And if you want to make a pass catcher, he's pass catcher number 2 just behind Kyle Pitts because he's a freak of nature. They go out there and they take Jackson Carman in round 2. Were there better options? I would say yes, but a guy who I think could be a day 1 guard and be a darn good one. Additionally, they get Deontay Smith, a good 4th round addition, a future tackle potentially, or maybe Jackson Carman eventually becomes the right tackle replacement to Riley Reif. They also get Joseph Osai, who I hope they're playing as an off-ball linebacker who blitzes a lot. Kind of what I would have hoped Baron Browning's role would have been in a 4-3. That's how I want Osai to be used. Right now, he's still being listed as edge. I don't know about him as a 4-3 DN, but maybe they see something I don't. They also got Cameron Sample, who I think has a lot of the traits and a lot of what you're looking for in a starting defensive end, especially in a 4-3. So I like the Cam Sample pick as well. Overall, I think this is a team that got a lot better. So as much as I kind of want to put them in B tier because it's easy to rebuild that type of roster, I think they made all the right moves in a lot of ways. I'm not going to say they made 100% of the right moves, but they did exactly what we would have said 4 months ago the Bengals needed to do to get better and maybe go above. Maybe they're an over based off of whatever their odds are, whatever their record is. I don't have it off the top of my head. If it, maybe 6.5, I think is what I've heard. This is a team right now that I would probably say over because they're that much better. Then we get to the Cleveland Browns, man. The first S tier that we'll see. They knocked out of the park. in free agency, you bring in Takk McKinley, and you're like, okay, that's not a great edge rusher opposite of Myles Garrett, but they got a body. Then they get you Davion Clowney, who we all know has the talent, and he has that, athletic ability, and now he's not being relied on to be edge one, the guy that defense is focusing on. He's just a complimentary guy opposite of Myles Garrett. Fantastic addition. Then you look at what they did in the draft, right? Greg Newsome, if he's healthy, great corner opposite of Denzel Ward. Even if he's not, you have Greedy Williams in the mix. Williams battles injuries. Newsome, you hope one of the two is at least healthy, right? You're at least having yourself a backup plan if one of the two is not on the field. Then you get Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, a first-round talent, my third highest ranked defensive player in this draft class, falls all the way to 52 somehow, some way. You get Anthony Schwartz, a burner, a wide receiver they just don't have. Demetric Felton's fantastic value in the 7th. James Hudson could be a future guard or tackle for this team. I've heard there might be a pathway to him starting about a year or two's time at either one of those positions. This is a team that got better now, but also down the line. And I don't even mention the best things they did in free agency. I'm sorry. John Johnson, the third. They got him at a great price. Troy Hill's your nickel corner. Him and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, for that matter, could play that role. Fantastic offseason. Got to be the front runners in the AFC North. Then to the Dallas Cowboys. I think it was a solid offseason. I'll keep them in B tier. I think they did the most they could, right? And like a big reason they were in B tier in the offseason video was they finally paid Dak Prescott. You had to do it. And I mean, if you made the decision 2 years ago, instead of paying Jalen Smith, which you look at the draft, I bet they really regret that decision. But if you paid him 2 years ago, it would have been at a cheaper point than now. So you can't really go above B because they mismanaged that situation. Additionally, they paid Jalen Smith, and then in this draft, they take Micah Parsons, who looks like a better Leighton Vander Esch, and they take a Jabril Cox, who looks like a poor man's Jalen Smith in a lot of ways. What are they doing with this linebacking core? Keep in mind, they also signed Keanu Neal to a very cheap contract to play linebacker. I just don't know what this team's doing, but also factoring in the offseason move from Mike Nolan to Dan Quinn as defensive coordinator, I think makes a world of difference, and I think that's worth a game at least to this team's record. Like, I know getting Dak back is obviously a huge improvement over Andy Dalton and, everyone else that was under center for Dallas last year. But also just getting a more confident defensive coordinator. Someone who's going to make it simple in that cover 3 defense. It's a very simplified defense, and I think it's going to limit the big plays. No blown coverages for the Cowboys, which is obviously a big deal, especially considering Trevon Diggs is still the number 1 corner on this team. And I like Diggs, but second-year corner, it's kind of a stretch to call him a number 1. I'd consider him a high-end 2. In an ideal world. And then you're relying on a rookie like Kelvin Joseph, and you also Nashawn Wright in the 4th round. I won't get into it. Everybody has called that a reach, so I won't sound like a broken record repeating everybody else, but that was an interesting pick. But I think it was a solid offseason. They really dominated and were huge winners at last year's draft and last year's offseason, other than not paying Dak Prescott. But this offseason, I think they're okay. Just having Dak back, though, makes this team inherently better. And then we get to the Denver Broncos, which at the time of this being recorded, you're going to see this on Thursday. I'm recording it on Tuesday. No word on an Aaron Rodgers trade. So this obviously could become S tier very quickly. I had him in A tier in the offseason video, and I think I'll keep him there. I wasn't really wowed by their draft class. I think Patrick Surtain, I've heard rumors of a key young player being involved in potential Aaron Rodgers trade. Surtain makes all the sense in the world to me. A team like the Packers need corner. I know they took Eric Stokes, but Patrick Surtain's better than Eric Stokes. Don't let Stokes prevent you from getting the number 1 corner in the class in a lot of people's eyes, including my own. Additionally, Quinn Miners was a really nice pick. Javonte Williams, I think, could be a bell cow running back for this team moving forward. And outside of their draft class, the free agency, they get Kyle Fuller on a great deal. They re-sign Justin Simmons. They're getting Von Miller back, and you hope he's healthy and clear of any off-the-field issues that could lead to him being suspended. But if he's not, he's still an elite edge rusher. Bring back Shelby Harris as well. Got Kareem Jackson. I mean, this defense is loaded, no doubt about it. And then they made some improvements throughout the draft. Even though I wasn't crazy about the Surtain pick, they did make improvements elsewhere. And again, I don't care what the package is. As long as it's not 5-1s, Cortland Sutton and Patrick Surtain or something ridiculous, this team becomes S tier if they get Aaron Rodgers. So if something breaks over the next couple of days, I'm not re-recording this. If they have Rodgers, they're an S tier. Simple as that. Then for the Detroit Lions, this is a tough one to grade because not a whole lot they did in the offseason. I think the biggest move and the smartest move they made was bringing back Romeo Okwara. Good move, right? finally got into double-digit sacks last year. It's one of the few players that kind of hit his stride and put together good numbers under the Matt Patricia defense. And then they dominated the draft. I mean, one of my 3 favorite draft classes. I didn't do any rankings. I don't think that's necessarily fair. I think a lot of teams had good drafts. So if I were to rank it, you'd be looking at teams I gave quality B+ grades to in the high teens to low 20s. That's just not really fair. The Lions, if I had to make, the cliche is the Mount Rushmore, it's kind of overplayed, but if I had to make a Mount Rushmore or a top 4 winners out of the draft, the Lions certainly are on that list. And they did it by building a foundation. They didn't rush they could have taken Justin Fields. A lot of people wish they took Justin Fields. But if Fields is drafted, what is he walking into? He's walking into the second worst roster in football, where he basically on offense has a blindside protector and then DeAndre Swift and a center. And that's it. Oh, and a tight end. Whatever that's worth. And then an abysmal defense with Romeo Okwara, and you hope Jeff Okudah's better. And then some decent safeties, I guess. This year, they got another tackle. Now you have your bookend tackles. You're set there. Obviously, you re-signed Frank Ragnow. Fantastic. You take Aleem McNeil, Levi Onwuzurike, solidify the interior of the defensive line. You also get Michael Brockers in a trade from the Rams for a 7th-round pick. Fantastic. You have Romeo Okwara back. You're hoping Trey Flowers remembers how to play football at a high level. Obviously, I think a coaching change could enable that. Still need some linebacker answers, though. They did get Derek Barnes, so even if it wasn't a top-end answer, he's a really solid blitzing inside linebacker. Obviously, a former outside linebacker at Purdue. Really like that addition. And also, Amon-Ra St. Brown, so they're getting better at the wide receiver core. I think Quintez Cephas isn't as bad as a lot of people want to make him out to be. I'm not saying he's going to light the world on fire, don't get me wrong, but I think he's going to be okay. I mean, I don't think he's a total scrub. And, honestly, I think he might outproduce Prashad Perriman and Tyrell Williams. I really think he could. Anyways, all that to say, if they took Justin Fields at 7, he's walking into a dumpster fire. Instead, they're putting pieces together to where they can take a quarterback next year, because they're still going to be bad. I know those positions you took, Penei Sewell is not worth a win, like a quarterback could be. Or 2 defensive tackles is not going to make that much of a difference on your record. So now this team is still picking top 5 next year, and they're going to be in line for a QB, whether it's Malik Willis, Sam Howell, Spencer Rattler, Keaton Slovis, or whoever emerges, JT Daniels. It doesn't matter. They're in a position to draft a quarterback, and they're not walking into a dumpster fire. Not a great situation, but not a dumpster fire, and I really appreciate that. Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, they look at this roster and they're saying it's not going to be fixed in a year. This is 3 years minimum. 3 years minimum. Even if you jumped on Madden and tried to fix the Lions, it would take you at least 2 to 3 seasons, and that'd be you maxing out and cheating the system and exploiting a video game. They don't have the luxury of doing that. Anyways, let me get off that soapbox. Really love what the Lions did in the draft specifically. Not a whole lot of action in the free agency period. Then we get to the Green Bay Packers. Whew. Man. I gotta go C tier. And then if they trade Rodgers, D. I mean, we've never seen anything like the Aaron Rodgers situation, dilemma, conundrum, whatever word you want to use. Reigning MVP, 48 touchdowns to 5 picks. I mean, just gaudy numbers, Madden-type numbers, speaking of video games. And they have irked him so much that he's willing to just be like, no, I'd rather host Jeopardy. Think about that. Think about how many people don't want to watch Jeopardy because it's boring. This guy would rather host Jeopardy than be the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers, one of the most storied franchises in the NFL. That is unbelievable. And it's because this team has slowly but surely undermined their star. Not a good idea. Also, when you look at free agency, they brought back Aaron Jones. That was about it. That's all they did really in free agency. So they have money to. So I'm not knocking that. I had them in the B tier when it came to the free agency tier list, just because I took their cap situation into account. Then you look at the draft. Eric Stokes. I predicted in a lot of my mocks. I had Tyson Campbell. I eventually kind of moved towards the notion they got to go wide receiver. They got to try to even this out with Aaron Rodgers. I didn't think it would fix the problem, but it might be a sign of goodwill. And goodwill can go a long way. But instead of Tyson Campbell, like I had predicted in a lot of mocks, it was Eric Stokes. It feels like a project corner, and also Georgia runs a lot of man press. This defense, and Jair Alexander specifically, his strength is playing in zone coverage, and I don't know where Stokes fits into that. He is long, and he is athletic. That is good. And then they take, Josh Myers ahead of some other center options I think were better, including Quinn Miners, Creed Humphrey, another one. Amari Rodgers, solid pick, but that's really all they have to hang their hat on in the draft. So I got to go C tier for the Packers. And then if this video is posted and I haven't mentioned an Aaron Rodgers trade, if Rodgers is dealt, they're D tier. At that point, if they squander that relationship, it's D tier. I would give them F if it was an option. Moving on to the Houston Texans. I don't know if you can put them in D. Yeah, I'm going to put them in D. So, I'll start with the Davis Mills pick because it's kind of similar to what I talked about with the Lions. A lot of people like PFF, like Mike Brenner has said, like that pick on fire. I understand where he's coming from. I hear that argument and I understand it. But I really don't think Mills becomes a starter until around the time Jalen Hurts did last year or Drew Lock a couple years ago in Denver. And I think that's the ideal spot. Let him sit, try to get acquainted to the NFL speed. Have Tyrod Taylor just be the QB out there taking the hits, just being the guy that has to absorb the blow of just a terrible team. And then eventually you make the move to Mills. And even if he doesn't look good, you give him the full season next year. And I think this team at the top of the draft should be eyeing someone like Derek Stingley or Kayvon Thibodeau for the same reason I set up with the Lions. Makes a lot of sense. If this team was the number one pick, maybe then, yeah, you're saying Spencer Rattler. But I'm also not entirely sold on these QBs yet. Now, if Spencer Rattler goes out there and lights college football world on fire, and he's like a surefire number one pick, I'll change my take. But right now, there's no clear-cut QB1, and Kayvon Thibodeau is a freak. Derek Stingley is unbelievable. Those guys are surefire, future Pro Bowl level guys. So I'm more interested in this team potentially having Davis Mills start, the back half of this year, and then all of the next year with the addition of a high-end defensive player. And then you start to build the cast around whoever the quarterback they might take in 2023 is. I know that we're talking big picture, but just like the Lions, if Nick Caserio's looking at this roster and saying, I'm going to fix it in a year, you should go ahead and just fire him because he's got the complete wrong outlook on how to change this team and its potential future. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take at least 3 years. Sorry, Houston fans. It's 2 to 3 years minimum. So I'm not in a rush to take a QB. And I think Davis Mills is fine, and who knows? We really don't know what he could be. He has a high upside, didn't get to play a whole lot in college, and he's a 5-star recruit taken on by Stanford, full scholarship for a reason, right? And maybe Houston finds a way to get the most out of him. I don't know. We'll certainly find out. I don't necessarily think it's the worst pick. I also like Nico Collins. They actually traded up a ton, though, in regards to the value, moving up for a pick earlier in the third round when they probably could have just waited and still got Nico Collins. So I like Collins as a player. Don't like the move that they made to get him. Also in the offseason, basically they just tried to load up on comp picks. They signed a bunch of players to one-year deals. They'll leave next offseason and try to have that factor into the equation that the NFL uses to award comp picks. Which in that mind, kind of makes me want to put them up to C. But this team didn't get better. And the only valuable asset they had is Deshaun Watson. After they cut J.J. Watt, that is. It was Deshaun Watson. And, they could have traded him before all these rumors came out. You don't know this is going to happen. So I don't really hold that against them. But now their only valuable asset has diminished value. And even if you trade him in 2022, it's probably not for what he could have given you earlier on in this offseason. So unfortunately, it's just a tough time to be a Houston fan. Between the Rockets and the Texans, it is not looking good. And if you're a Rangers fan, that's not necessarily easy either. Anyways, sticking to football, focus. We get to the Indianapolis Colts, and I was prepared to put them in C tier. Kwity Paye is a fantastic pick in the first round. Didn't really love anything else after that. Didn't really spend a lot of money. They didn't do anything in the offseason. But then they just signed Eric Fisher, and I'll put him in the very end of B tier. They barely scraping into B tier. Fisher's going to miss some time. I don't know the exact details on his timetable when he'll be back, but once he is back, he's a plus level left tackle. And that addressed one of the two needs I think this roster has to have if they're going to have success with Carson Wentz. I think Carson Wentz can be a good quarterback, but you go back to his MVP season, and there are 3 big elements I give credit to. Because, one, he played well, but he was supported by Frank Reich. Check. He's back with Frank Reich. He had a very good offensive line that year. And now with Eric Fisher, once he's in the lineup, that's probably a top 5 offensive line in football. But he also had fantastic weapons. Alshon Jeffrey put up a career season. Deshaun Jackson was mostly healthy. Zach Ertz was playing at a super high level. One of the top 3 tight ends in football at the time. And right now, I look at this team and I'm a big believer in Michael Pittman. If you saw my breakout video, I'll have that somewhere on the screen as well. I think Michael Pittman's due for a big second-year breakout. But I don't know if he's enough. Like, Paris Campbell's always hurt. T.Y. Hilton's getting old. Zach Pascal, I mean, he's okay, I guess. I'm from Virginia. I want to root for an ODU Monarch, but I just don't know how realistic it is to expect Pascal to be, the top-end number 2. So, if anything, I think Pittman could be a top-end number 2. This team needed an elite wide receiver. If they got Kenny Golladay, I'd probably be talking about them in A tier, but instead, they just scrape into B tier by signing Eric Fisher. They alleviate one of the other 2 problems left, but they still don't have a top-end wide receiver unless Michael Pittman makes the jump from fine rookie season to an elite wide receiver, which I don't think is realistic. They could be good, just not amazing. He's not going to light the world on fire. At least I'm not really willing to say that right now. Overall, I think the team did get better. Kwity Paye's a fantastic first-round pick, but I didn't love, like I said, anything else they did. Then for the Jacksonville Jaguars, really it's only fair that I put them, and I'm gonna not ranking them above these other teams, but kind of in the similar grouping with the Lions and the Bengals, where the Lions didn't spend a whole lot of money in free agency, but you look at their draft, I think they made the right moves, built a foundation, but they also had a ton of holes. Like, it's easy to make that team better. And the Bengals, easy to make that team better. And then the Jags, obviously, they won the lottery ticket of Trevor Lawrence. Like, once you got the number 1 pick, we knew who it was. I really didn't like anything else Urban Meyer did afterwards. Reportedly, they wanted Kadarius Toney at 25 if he was there. So, unfortunately for the Jags, that was snatched from him. I don't know if ETN can be used in that same gadget wide receiver running back blend that Urban Meyer's used wide receivers for prior to this, and a lot of that obviously at the college level. I think it's a different blend how you can use players at the college level versus how they stack up in that similar role at the NFL level. Urban Meyer might have the remedy though. He might have the fix, and ETN might be the perfect fit. Actually, I think Kadarius Toney might have been the perfect fit because that's who they were eyeing. Anyways, they still had some decent picks. I mean, you bring in Tyson Campbell, you obviously sign Shaquille Griffin. Now you have a ton of outside corners. I don't know who's going to play the slot, but you have a ton of talent there on the outside. Rayshon Jenkins, not crazy about that. You draft Andre Sisco, could be risky, but you're putting in bodies. You're trying to find an answer there at the safety spot. Also, you bring an abundance of players. You have a scheme change that I think benefits Kayvon Chason, moving to a 3-4. Him and Josh Allen, 3-4 outside linebackers. And Chason actually plays pretty well in coverage and space. There were a lot of times last year, randomly, I was watching Jags games, and he was picking up running backs pretty well, which is really remarkable given he's a pass rusher first. Off that soapbox, I think this team's scheme will help Chason, and obviously it'll benefit Allen. He's already great. You bring in Roy Robertson-Harris. You almost had Tyson Alualu, but he goes back to Pittsburgh. Overall, this team right now doesn't have any huge holes, which is crazy. They can get better at a lot of positions, like Cam Robinson. They could get better at left tackle. Andrew Norwell, they could get maybe not better, but cheaper, and have someone play at a similar level. There's still moves to be made, but right now there's no glaring hole. Maybe then tight end. I mean, Tim Tebow might be the guy. Don't know if he actually makes the roster, but other than tight end, I don't really see any glaring huge needs, and tight end's a pretty, it's not the biggest position of value in the NFL nowadays, unless you're a Darren Waller, Travis Kelce, which, speaking of those two, they're the next 2 teams. Kansas City Chiefs. I think I got to put them in A tier. Really contemplated putting them in S, and maybe I'll talk myself into it as I go through this. Obviously, you look at free agency, you bring in Joe Thuney. Fantastic signing. One of the best guards in football. You make the trade, and actually, it's really just a pick swap. You move from 31 back into the second round. You also give up some of those mid-round assets. But you still have some value in return there, and you get Orlando Brown. So now that left side of the offensive line is looking elite. Orlando Brown Jr. with Joe Thuney, I'm all about it. Also, you make other moves. We're talking about the interior of the offensive line. Austin Blythe. You draft Creed Humphrey, which those kind of contradict each other. I don't know what the plan is there, but also trust this organization. You get a great value in Trey Smith in the 6th round. He could be your day 1 right guard, and maybe you're playing Kyle Long at right tackle over Mike Remmers, who maybe Kyle Long's looking in as good a shape as we've ever seen him. Last we saw him play tackle, it wasn't great, but he looks like he's in great shape, and Mike Remmers is not a very good tackle, so it doesn't take a whole lot to beat that low bar. And then you look at the draft, you draft Nick Bolton. I think that's a terrific pick. I really do love what they did there. And overall, when you look at this team, especially on the defensive side, they did just enough to make it be the same, maybe a little better. Really, Bolton's the big one. That linebacking core was the one area they could continue to get better. Could use another corner. Not going to dispute that, but overall, I think this team did a lot of the things right. Still looking for another wide receiver. Missed out on Juju Smith-Schuster. I think would have been a really nice compliment to this team, but Demarcus Robinson's back. Big year for Mecole Hardman, and you still have Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Patrick Mahomes. This team is set. I'll keep them in A tier, though. Then we get to the Oakland Raiders, and man, this team, I don't know what to do with them. Did I say the Oakland Raiders also? The Las Vegas Raiders. Can't believe I'm still getting used to that. But the Vegas Raiders, man, it feels like one step forward, one step back simultaneously. Like they'll make a move, they'll make a draft pick. You're like, why did you do that? And then they followed up with the one where you're like, wow, that's a steal. Case in point, the NFL draft, right? You take Alex Leatherwood, Tom Cable's #1 tackle, you probably heard it 1,000 times. That's cool. Confidence in your own evaluation, that's fine. I just don't know about him playing right tackle. And then they move up and they somehow get Trevon Merrick, who somehow becomes safety 3 in the class. Fantastic value. But then right after that, they go out there and get Divine Diablo, who's going to be a linebacker, safety hybrid. And it's like, all right, we got it. You're going to use Merrick in a lot of different ways. You can use Diablo in a lot of different ways. And then they just like kicking a dead horse, take Tyree Gillespie, who's like the center fielder of all those 3 safeties. And it's just like, man, you already have Jonathan Abrams. Like, I'm really confused by what you're going. It looks like they're just going to move on from Abrams. I really don't know if he has a future with this team. Anyways, this team just goes back and forth and back and forth. They cut Richie Incognito. They get him back at a good value. That's cool. They trade Trent Brown. Guess they had to. Locker room problems there seemingly were the biggest issue. But, they have good talent across the offensive line. Denzel Good maybe can fill that role. I just don't know with this team. I don't know if they got any better. I think they just stayed the same and threw bodies in different areas. But I will say, Yannick Ngakoue was one of my favorite signings of free agency. And also, they threw a ton of darts there. Solomon Thomas, Jonathan Hankins. They brought in a bunch of guys across the defensive line trying to fix that problem. And, one of these days, I think Clelin Ferrell is still getting better. I think Max Crosby is a fine NFL player. And Yannick Ngakoue has very high, more than plus level potential. He could be a Pro Bowl level edge rusher. So they also aren't benefited by playing in a very good division. So I'll put them in B just because I'm kind of lost. I don't even know. Them and the Colts, I don't know where to put them. Really having a hard time with those 2 squads. Moving on to the Los Angeles Chargers. This is A, maybe S tier. I'm not crazy about the Matt Filer signing, but Corey Linsley. You get the best center available. Sign me up for that. That's fantastic. And that's really the biggest offseason move. They re-signed Michael Davis, who, we'll see. 3-year contract, or extension, I should say. I don't think that's the end-all, be-all, and it's not the best cornerback move they made this offseason. Taking Asante Samuel in the 2nd round, a steal. Rashawn Slater at 13, a steal. Josh Palmer at pick number 77, a fantastic fit. Really, it's the draft that buoys this team up from, a good offseason. They got better, B tier, to where they're definitely in A tier. No doubt about it. You know what? Actually, going back to this Raiders one, I don't know if they got better. I really don't know if they got better. B tier to me signals this team got slightly better. A tier, this team significantly has improved. C tier, they won the offseason. I don't know if Oakland got better, or Las Vegas got better. I'm still doing that. Anyways, back to the Chargers. That's what we were talking about. They definitely got better. They're in A tier. The LA Rams. Stafford is an improvement over Goff. So we'll start there. That's a big time improvement. But they had to get rid of Michael Brockers to shed some salary. And that's a big loss. Bigger loss than I think people want to give it credit for, because he's, defensive tackle, defensive end. Spent a lot of money on Leonard Floyd, who, when it comes to hurries and pass rush win percentage, actually kind of took a step back last year, just had more sacks. And that's kind of the Aaron Donald effect. So the more I think about that deal, $16 million a year is just an abundance of money for someone like Leonard Floyd. And then their draft, Tutu Atwell could be something. A lot of people are saying he's the next Deshaun Jackson, but Deshaun Jackson's got 3 inches and at least 15, 20 pounds on him. Minimal. I mean, Tutu Atwell's a small, skinny dude, and I feel like he's just not going to be able to last. And I hope I'm wrong. He's electric. He's a playmaking machine. He's a big play waiting to happen. I just don't know if he can stay on the field. They didn't really address line or defense, really. They got Ernest Jones. That's an okay pick, and he could be a solid linebacker for him. That was the biggest position in need. They also lost John Johnson III. You lost Troy Hill. Who's your safety moving forward? Is it Taylor Rapp, and who else? And who's your nickel guy? So I don't know. But I did like the Robert Rochelle pick. That was probably my favorite pick of theirs. 4th round corner. But even him, he's not a player who's going to make an impact the next 2 years. He's so raw, wide receiver turn corner, freak athlete though. But in 3 years' time, he could be something. I'll put him in B, just ahead of the Colts, just because I think Stafford and McVay could be up to some crazy elite level offensive production. If they were a good offense with Jared Goff. But Uncle Goff has always been, he's slow, not a quick decision maker, can sit on one read, yada, yada, yada. And that felt like it might limit what McVay wants to do with his offense. Matt Stafford, super smart guy, big arm, accurate, tough. No excuses now. Like, this should be peak Sean McVay offense that we see next year. And I'm excited to see what it is. Then for the Miami Dolphins, I'll put them in A tier. I overall like what they did. Obviously, I'm putting them in A tier. I think they are significantly improved. Bring in Will Fuller, and they draft Jalen Waddle. You get weapons for Tua Tagovailoa. Fantastic. You draft Liam Eichenberg. You're getting some protection. You move on from Eric Flowers, who honestly, in a lot of ways, makes too much money. 3 years, $30 million. That's a ton to pay Eric Flowers. Now you're going to kick Robert Hunt, inside to play guard, where I think he could be a fantastic run-blocking machine. Though on that point, they did not address running back, which feels a little interesting. Definitely felt like they could get better there, though I think Myles Gaskins, if he can stay healthy, can be okay. Savon Ahmed had some flashes. Shows a lot of ability to break tackles, be evasive in the open field, kind of like those two as a potential 1-2 duo. But overall, this team's MO was to eliminate any sort of excuses for Tua going into year 2. They're getting a new offensive coordinator. Hope that innovates the offense and updates it to a more modern standard compared to what they had with Chan Gailey. They got weapons. They got some protection in general across the offensive line. That's great. Bernard McKinney in a trade from Houston. Solid inside linebacker. Jalen Phillips, edge 1 to me. Plug-and-play starter. Potential defensive rookie of the year type of guy. Did cut Bobby McCain, but then Javon Holland, I think, is going to play a very similar type of role, just younger and cheaper. So love that. Also, Justin Coleman, underrated signing. 1 year's under $3 million. Or 1 year under $3 million contract, if I can say that right. But he, at his best, is one of the better slot corners. You already have Xavier Howard and Byron Jones on the outside. I mean, that's a nasty secondary. Brian Flores, obviously a fantastic coach. I think I'd be crazy to say anything other than A tier for the Miami Dolphins. Then we get to the Minnesota Vikings. And I had them in B tier in my offseason. I'm definitely bumping them up to A, contemplating S tier. Starting with free agency, you bring in Patrick Peterson. That's one that stands out off the top of my head. Dalvin Tomlinson. You have Michael Pierce, but Tomlinson's a younger, ascending version of Michael Pierce. And after this year with Michael Pierce, you could move on. But additionally, even if you have Michael Pierce and Tomlinson on the field at the same time, you should on first and second down. This team was terrible at stopping the run last year. Those two will help protect your linebacking core. And then in passing situations, I think you can keep Tomlinson out there. He has some pass rush upside. And you bring in somebody who is more of a pass rush specialist, and you take Pierce off the field. Also, when you look at the NFL draft, I mean, slam dunk after slam dunk after slam dunk, right? You trade back from 14 to 23, still get the guy we all wanted them to take in Christian Darrisaw. And then those 2 third-round picks they got from the Jets become Kellen Mond, a free opportunity to develop a high upside quarterback. And at the minimum, it's the best backup they've had in years. Better than Sean Mannion by a mile, just given his athletic ability, high floor. But if he gets to learn how to be a more refined, consistent, accurate passer from Kirk Cousins, the embodiment of all those traits, they might have something in 2 to 3 years' time. And then the other third-round pick becomes Wyatt Davis, day 1 starting guard. So you have Darrisaw, Davis, you fix the offensive line for the most part, and then you got a better backup quarterback and maybe a future starter. Also, Janarius Robinson's a super long, lanky. This team doesn't always develop edge rushers, especially those late-round guys other than Danielle Hunter. But Robinson could have the making of a guy who could start opposite of Danielle Hunter, assuming they do hold on to him. I'm not anticipating any trades. Also, Chaz Surratt, really like that third-round pick. That's your Anthony Barr replacement in a year's time. Overall, fantastic draft and a very good free agency as well. Also, I didn't even mention Mackenzie Alexander's coming back to Minnesota. He was great playing the nickel. I think it's an underrated signing and something that we won't talk about until we get to the season. We see how big of an impact he has. Nickel corners are a bigger part of the game today than ever. So I'm all about the signings and the prioritizing those third corners. Then we get to the New England Patriots. This is a S tier. They were probably my winners of free agency. I mean, they just did so much. Like, they lacked... This free agency really wasn't great for trying to find a wide receiver. They still did that. They brought in Nelson Aguilar. They bring in Kendrick Bourne as well. Who Bourne's he's pretty solid across the board. And then Aguilar, obviously, big play ability. But instead, they get cheaper pass catchers who can kind of do a lot of different things. I kind of had this take. I didn't get a whole lot of blowback, so hopefully it's something that people listen and kind of agree to. But tight ends in a lot of ways are cheaper mismatches than what a wide receiver... Because you had to be an elite wide receiver to be a mismatch. An average wide receiver doesn't do that. Tight end, even an average tight end can create mismatches just given their size, right? Like Kyle Rudolph's been one of the best red zone threats for almost a decade now, maybe even a full decade, just given he's huge and he has great hands and he's dynamic and he's elite in the red zone. With the additions of Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, you have two mismatches. They're too big and strong to be covered by safeties, too athletic, and honestly, still probably stronger than a lot of linebackers. And they can do a lot over the middle of the field, which will make it easier for whether it's Cam Newton or Mac Jones, who we'll talk about Jones here in a second. Overall, just a fantastic free agency. They spent a lot of money and they got improvements across the board. And even the contracts they paid out, they can get out of Kendrick Bourne in about a year or two's time. Jalen Mills, you can get out in about 2 years' time. Devon Godshaw, 2-year contract. Like, nothing is going to break the bank and ruin what this team does moving forward. They have ways to maneuver the salary cap, and after this offseason, obviously, the cap's going to go up. Like, they're going to be in a good spot, even after spending a ton of money. And then you look at the draft. Mac Jones falls their lap. Felt like a match made in heaven, and a guy they might be eyeing as a QB of the future, and they don't have to trade up or do anything to get him. Christian Barmore, the concerns were he relied on the Alabama regiment to keep him in line. If there's anybody who's going to be able to do something similar, it's Bill Belichick in New England, and he's a first-round talent. Ronnie Perkins somehow falls to them the third round, best player available approach, and they gobble him up. I think he'll be fantastic for Bill Belichick. Overall, and then Cameron McGrone in the fifth round, potential linebacker future, though I don't think he's going to play this year because of his still recovering from injuries, but guy who could start in 2022. Just a great offseason. Congratulations, Pats fans. You've done it again, you bastards. You've had a great offseason, and you're in line to potentially win that division. And this year, if they win the division, it's way more merited because look at where the Bills and look at where the Dolphins are. Bills won the division last year, had a very good offseason. Dolphins were 10 wins and somehow missed the playoffs. They had a great offseason, so the AFC East is scary good. And moving on to the Saints, I think I got to put them in D tier, man. I think they're the losers of the draft. I just wasn't crazy about anything they did. Peyton Turner felt early. I know what Sean Payton sees in him, and I get that. But I'd almost rather just use that pick on a wide receiver like Elijah Moore or maybe even a corner. If you're going to reach, maybe go get a corner because that's a huge area of need. Their best pick of the draft, though, was a corner in Paulson Adebo. Good playmaking ability, reads quarterbacks, knows how to break on the football, but everything else definitely needs to be improved. Maybe even double up at corner. You don't really know what's going to happen with Marshawn Lattimore. Pete Warner was not originally going to be picked. I've heard that it was going to be Terrence Marshall, but then the Panthers swooped in, took Marshall before the Saints pick, so then they take Pete Warner maybe a little earlier than what people anticipated. I think Warner's going to be a good player. He has a very high floor. He is very A.J. Hawk in a lot of ways. Doesn't make those splash plays that make you a first rounder, but he does nothing wrong, and there is some value to that. So, I mean, maybe you could say this is a C tier. Also, you could argue this is a C tier because of their cap restraint and where they were as a team, right? Like $100 million. It's almost amazing that they're back where they need to be in a lot of ways. But you keep Marcus Williams around on the franchise tag. You're going to find out what happens post Drew Brees. Like, this is going to be a good test to see. Maybe this is the year Jameis Winston plays out of his mind and gives you what we all think he could be based out of what he was in college. So I'll bump him up to C, but really didn't like the draft. They're probably the losers of it, which sucks to say, but they also just didn't have a lot of draft capital, didn't have a lot of money to spend in free agency. I'll put them in C tier. They do have a good roster as is, so I don't know if they necessarily got worse, like D tier in my eyes would indicate. So I'll put them into C tier. Then the New York Giants, man. I think I got to do it. I think I'm going to put them in S tier. I had them in A tier in the offseason, then they just kept going, man. You trade down. You get a future first, and you get a guy like Kadarius Toney, who I've been wanting this team to take Jalen Waddle. I know, like, Jason Garrett has never had a player like Waddle or Toney, so you don't know if there's a defined role. If there isn't, you fire Garrett and you find somebody who's smart enough to do it. I mean, it's as simple as that. Whether it makes an impact year one, Kadarius Toney is a big playmaker, and at the minimum, he's a Sterling Shepard replacement as the future slot guy, and it saves you some money because he'll make less money than whatever Sterling Shepard's going to ask for. Unless Shepard asks for a ridiculously low contract, then sure, bring him back for depth. Anyways, that's not what we're talking about. But this team just did so much, and obviously Kenny Galladay's that's the big free agent signing this team made. Fantastic addition. I mean, that was what this team needed. They needed to bail out, and they needed to put more weapons around Daniel Jones so you could see in year 3, is he our guy? Now they're positioned next year, especially with 2 first-round picks, one of their own, one of Chicago's. You're in a position next year where maybe this roster is good enough to buoy them up into the teens, kind of that no man's land where the Cardinals through Washington football team, Chicago Bears were, and you can't get a quarterback there. I think there might be a quarterback that falls to that point next year, but we don't know yet. We really don't know. But you have 2 first-round picks to be able to move up and go get your guy, whoever it might be. So I think this team had a fantastic free agency. They did a great job in the draft, addressed a lot of needs, specifically on the edge. Azeez Ojulari, fantastic steal. Elderson Smith, a lot of things to like about him as a potential starter on the edge. I think this team did a lot to get much improved and could potentially compete, which is crazy to say. They could compete for the NFC East crown. That division is all if, ands, or buts. Like, you need Daniel Jones to play well. You need Ryan Fitzpatrick to play well for Washington. Really, the Cowboys are putting themselves in a good spot. They have the fewest question marks. Really, it's like, can Mike McCarthy not blow it? And can that defense just be okay? That defense is okay, and McCarthy does an okay job. They're probably the winners of the division. But if Fitzpatrick plays at a good level, Washington football team's a force to be reckoned with. If Daniel Jones can play at a plus level, that's a team that's a force to be reckoned with. And then there's the Eagles, I guess. Sorry, Eagles fans. There's no path there. So, on to the New York Jets. I'll put them in A tier. Obviously, they spent a lot of money in free agency. You bring in Corey Davis. You bring in Carl Lawson. I'm all about it. Fantastic uses of money. Good young players. Players who feel like they're still getting better, which you love to see. And then in the draft, obviously, Zach Wilson's your QB of the future. Fresh start with Robert Saleh, Michael LaFleur. I think Wilson's going to be a stud. Did they give up a lot? Yeah, those 2/3 we talked about with the Minnesota trade that become 2 quality level players for the Vikings. And the Jets could have just stayed at 23, maybe taken Darisaw to be a future right tackle, and then gone Wyatt Davis later on. They could have done the same thing basically as the Vikings, and then had another third to use somewhere else, maybe at corner. They did not get a corner. Right now, Bryce Hall is their number 1 CB, which is concerning, though I like Bryce Hall. And that Robert Saleh defense knows how to hide the weakness of a cornerback group. Makes the game simple. Obviously, we talked about that cover 3 scheme. It can minimize weaknesses at the outside corner spot. So I think they'll be okay. But they also needed another edge rusher opposite of Carl Lawson, and still need to find an answer there. But this team had a lot of holes to fix, kind of like what we talked about with the Bengals, the Jags, the Lions, and they filled a lot of them. I will say, though, let me know in the comments. This is the discussion I really want to have. Apparently, Elijah Vera Tucker was going to be the pick for the Pats until the Jets moved up and took him. Do you think the Jets are going to regret forcing the Pats to take Mac Jones? Like, if Mac Jones can be anything near what Tom Brady was, it didn't even have to be Tom Brady. He could just be a B-plus level QB with that good of a roster, and it's going to cause the Jets headaches for a decade, potentially. And the Jets are going to be like, why did we move up? They could have taken Elijah Vera Tucker and would have been way less harmful to us. Anyways, let me know what you think about that. I thought that was an interesting story when I heard it after the draft. Then we get to the Philadelphia Eagles. Man, they didn't have a whole lot they could do in free agency, right? Really limited by no cap room. But then they get Anthony Harris, who I think is a really solid addition, 1 year, $5 million contract. I think they put together a really solid draft class. So considering I had him in C tier in the offseason, and if it weren't for Anthony Harris, they would have been in D just because they did nothing, and they still have Zach Ertz, which irks me. Need to move on from that contract and just allow him to go somewhere where he can continue to have success and potentially compete for a ring. But then this draft was fantastic. I mean, they move up to get their guy, their wide receiver. They wanted Devonta Smith, and I think he opens up a lot for Jalen Reagor. And you're trying to make the game easier for Jalen Hurts, so an elite separator with great hands, who's also good after the catch, Devonta Smith, check that box. And then you move on to the later rounds. Milton Williams, Marlon Tuipulotu, get some interior guys trying to get younger across the defensive line. overall, I think it was a really solid draft. I don't think there was any pick that I looked at the Eagles and I was like, I don't like that one. I don't really care for that pick. Landon Dickerson, maybe he's the closest thing, but even when he's healthy, you're looking at a potential Jason Kelce replacement, a potential Brandon Brooks replacement, or if both of those guys are healthy, he's your starting left guard. So Dickerson, and he's even played tackle. So he has a ton of flexibility for an offensive line that could not stay healthy last year. So even the Dickerson pick, which I'm not crazy about, I can't say it's a bad pick. Then we get to the Pittsburgh Steelers. This kills me to do it, but I think I gotta go C tier, man. They bring back Juju Smith-Schuster, and that was about the biggest move they made in the offseason. Even doing that, they had to cut Steven Nelson. You bring Tyson Alualu back, that's good. You like to see that. We're going to find out what Chukwuma Okorafor is all about. He's going to be the starting left tackle. I think Zach Banner will be a good right tackle. I'm not really worried about that spot. It's really Chugs and what he will look as a full-time starter at left tackle. They drafted him to be a development guy. Has he developed? We will certainly find out. Najee Harris, I think, is going to be a stud running back, but he's going to need the offensive line to play well in front of him. Kendrick Green, I think, will be a big factor in that. Great run blocking guy who's going to be the starting center moving forward, but you're still relying on a rookie on the offensive line. Kevin Dotson, you expect to get better in year two. He was already good in the running game last year, so it comes down to those tackles. And then also, it helps running the football when you have a good enough passing game, right? When defense can't just stack the box, put 7-8 at the line of scrimmage and just plug every hole. So Big Ben's going to have to be improved. And really, I think it comes down to the offensive coordinator, Matt Canada. And a new offensive scheme, I think, goes a long way. And this is me being a Steelers fan, probably ringing on about why I think we can still be competitive and maybe can win the division. And I think a lot of what people point to last year as the problem for the Steelers offenses comes down to Randy Fichtner and his offensive philosophy, those quick passes, inability to run the football, and how he draws up plays. I just didn't think it worked, and then we didn't want to take deep shots. But then when you see Ben in a lot of the game, like the Colts game at the end of the year, and the second half of the Browns game, where he's putting up gaudy numbers because he's throwing so much, but also he's calling the plays, and they're throwing the ball down the field. And next thing you know, things start to open up. You have a 10-yard run every once in a while, and it's like, wow, especially that Colts game. Go back and watch that second half of the Colts game. Big Ben was calling plays. He was throwing the ball down the field, and I think he threw a couple of really beautiful downfield passes. And it opened up the run game. You see Benny Snell, you see James Conner, you finally see these guys have some success. So I'm hoping Matt Canada is the change the Steelers need. You know, a change in philosophy can help open up the running game. You see Kyle Shanahan, anywhere he goes, they run the ball well. Robert Saleh is going to be the same way with, Mike LaFleur. I'm hoping that's kind of the case. And also, Matt Canada is all about lateral movement. Not just vertical, but lateral. And Deontay Johnson, as somebody who can be used on jet sweeps, on these end-around handoffs that the NFL loves nowadays, stretching defenses out, making them defend every blade of grass out there. I think Deontay Johnson's a fantastic fit for that, and he's a great deep threat. I'm a huge Chase Claypool fan. Obviously, I'm also a Notre Dame fan, so partial bias there, but I think Matt Canada, in about a year's time, book it, here's my hot take of the video, I think Matt Canada, we could look at if the Steelers pan out like I hope they do, could be the most valuable change Pittsburgh made. More valuable than any re-signing or any draft pick. Matt Canada could be the guy we look at and say, that was what this team needed. We'll see. Let me know what you think. I might be crazy. I might be too hopeful. Anyways, let's move on from the Steelers. I got them in C tier. San Francisco 49ers, man. You want to talk about a team that... On to the San Francisco 49ers. Yeah, I think I got to go A tier, man. I think they've had a really solid offseason. Really, the free agency was... bringing the group back, especially the corners, right? They get Jason Verrett back. They get Quan Williams back. Do a lot of the dirty work there. Jaquiski Tartt comes back. All about it. I think that's fantastic. You're going to expect a big second year out of someone like Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel. Hopefully he stays healthy. And then you look at the draft, and Trey Lance, high upside guy, could be the starter earlier than people think. And maybe this allows them to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo. Who knows? I mean, I think they hold on to him at least till maybe the trade deadline. Maybe then there's a deal moved, even though I'm not crazy about getting a QB midway through the year, because then he's got to learn an offense, and I don't know, that could be complicated. But maybe they cut him, or maybe there's a deal to be made with Washington or some other QB needy team. The Carolina Panthers might be in. I don't know. But anyways, even if they keep Garoppolo, they have someone who allows them to not force Trey Lance too early. They keep Trent Williams around, make him the highest paid offensive lineman. Tackles age well nowadays, just like QBs. They can play deeper in their career. They re-signed Kyle Juszczyk. A lot of money for a fullback, but Juszczyk's more than a fullback. Kind of like what we talked about with Kyle Pitts being a dynamic playmaker. Juszczyk's like the baby version of that. As a fullback, he's just used in so many different ways. So, and then you draft Aaron Banks. Think he fits what this team could do. Trey Sermon, another good running back into that group. Overall, this team definitely got better. Trey Lance is a big part of it. And then they kept the core together. So, this is a team that, they get competent QB play. They're Super Bowl contenders, just given how good the rest of the roster is. And I think Trey Lance and I think a healthy Jimmy Garoppolo give you both of those. I think Lance can give you elite QB play at his peak and with his potential. And then if he's elite, then, you might want to consider this team S tier offseason, but also front runners for the Super Bowl. But that's not the point of this video. That's not what we're talking about here. For the Seattle Seahawks, they held on to Russell Wilson. Looks like they've iced over that tension. At least as of right now, it looks like it's okay, which is good. Only 3 picks in the NFL draft. I think they made solid picks. Dwayne Eskridge, in some people's eyes, was a reach. I think he's a solid field-stretching slot player. Another weapon for Russell Westbrook. I'm getting ready for basketball content. I'm going to do my NBA playoff predictions here in about a week or so once the regular season's ended. Hopefully you're looking forward to that. Russell Wilson, though, gets another weapon. And also Stone Forsythe, not in a position where he has to be rushed out on the field, can learn from Dwayne Brown. I think that's a stable left tackle of the future minimum. Like stable, quality, league average. That's the floor. And then also, Trey Brown could be a really nice nickel. And again, I value the nickel a lot. Those slot corners are very valuable nowadays, and I think Trey Brown's a solid one. You look at free agency, Carlos Dunlap bringing him back, I think that's great. They were able to cut him, bring him back at a cheaper, more reasonable deal. That's great. Bring back Chris Carson, who I think fits. He's one of the few power backs I think can be a top-end running back. Obviously, it's not always the case, but Carson kind of has that play style that I value where it's 4 yards every time you get him the football. He doesn't have that big play. The NFL loves its big plays, but guys like Najee Harris or Chris Carson or Ezekiel Elliott or Derrick Henry has big play ability, but those guys' ability to just churn out 4 or 5 yards a touch, I love that. So I think if this team wants to run the football more, that bodes well for Chris Carson, but can he stay healthy? That's a big question, but I'll put this team in B tier. I think they did get a little better, but they also have to compete against one of maybe even the toughest division in football. Only a handful of teams left. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, one of 2 S-tier teams left. You take your pick between these two. Who's going to be S-tier? You watched a lot of my content. You know who it's going to be. But Tampa Bay, man, when it comes to free agency, they brought the core back together. Brought back all 22 starters. Every impact player from the Super Bowl run last year is back. I think you look at the NFL draft, future JPP replacement in the first round, and Joe Tryon, a guy who could be a rotational piece and a quality replacement of one of the 2 guys gets hurt, Shaq Barrett or JPP, that is, and Joe Tryon. Great pick. Kyle Trask, you're trying to find a QB of the future. I like it. Similar weaknesses to what Tom Brady had when he came out of Michigan. Could be a match made in heaven when it comes to mentor to Padawan, if you will. Star Wars kind of reference there, but relationship between those two. And then overall, this team just knocked away solid pick after solid pick. Jalen Darden could be a really nice slot player. Upgrade over Scotty Miller or Tyler Johnson. He could also be a potential Chris Godwin replacement. I mean, this team overall also, Robert Hainsey out of Notre Dame could be a tackle maybe of the future, but I think he's more in line to be a center to guard replacement. You only have Ryan Jensen for 1 more year. Ellie Marpet continuously gets hurt. Hainsey could fill in for him. This team did a lot to bolster their depth, but also addressing needs of the future. And they're going to be able to stay competitive long term because of that. So, free agency, you keep the core together. You're trying to run it back. Draft, you're finding depth. You're finding replacements of the future. You couldn't ask for a better offseason, really. Then the Tennessee Titans. So, free agency kind of scared me with this team, right? Because obviously they lose Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith, and I'm left wondering, what are they going to do on offense? But then they get Bud Dupree, bring in Janoris Jenkins, get Jayon Brown back for a 1-year, $5 million contract, super cheap. They get Danico Autry. And I'm like, wow, I really like what they did on the defensive side. And maybe that counteracts what they lost on offense. And then you get to the draft, you add Caleb Farley, high variance player. He could be a freak, or because of his injuries, he might not get off the ground, which sucks to say. Elijah Molden, one of my favorite picks of the entire draft. Fantastic value, but they got him in the 4th round. Their 2nd round selection, Dylan Radunz, plug and play right tackle. Offseason video, I had him in B tier. I think that's where I'm going to keep him. I still do. I am worried Josh Reynolds, he's just a very unproven commodity. I don't know if he can be a consistent number 2 wide receiver. And right now, the offense feels like a Derrick Henry or A.J. Brown injury away from falling out from underneath him in a lot of ways. Like, especially Derrick Henry. If Derrick Henry gets hurt, I don't know if this is if Derrick Henry was out for the entire year, I don't know if this team could win 8 games. But with Derrick Henry, I think they can win 10-12 in that 10-12 window. And with no A.J. Brown, I really don't know how good Tannehill looks. And even no Corey Davis, that's a big loss like that. And no Jonnu Smith. They're making it tough to be a competitive passing team. They are aided, though, by playing in the worst division in football in the AFC South, in my opinion. You get 2 free wins from the Texans. The Jags got better, but you're still at least splitting that series with them. And then the Colts have a ton of question marks, though they could be your biggest competition to win the division. So, I think the Titans did get better. But I worry about what that offense could be looking like, though I think the defense will be vastly improved to where they were last year. Last but not least, let's finish off the video. I've been recording for over an hour now. I got another long video. I always tell myself I'm not going to make these too long, so I apologize. If you're still listening, comment down below. Let's see, I'm still watching, or something like that. I'll appreciate it, and I'll know that you made it to this point and felt the desire to comment that. That would mean the world to me. But anyways, Washington football team, our final S tier. Man, free agency was very productive. They get William Jackson III, and you could say, well, they already have great pass rush. Do you need to spend money on corner? I say, why not have both? Why not having a guy who is a great man press corner, can create turnovers, have him on the back end, try to boost and be an additional plus to that defense who already has fantastic playmakers and pass rushers up front. They get Ryan Fitzpatrick, who feels like a solid enough option to potentially win the division. I am nervous about Fitzpatrick because it can be a bit of a roller coaster and he can be turnover prone, but if he can be game manager and limit how many bad spots and how many bad turnovers he has, doesn't put that defense in a bad situation, this is obviously a team with a potential to win the division again. I mean, I also think Antonio Gibson going to get better in year 2. Terry McLaurin has a bunch of help on the outside. I didn't even mention Curtis Samuel. What a fantastic signing that was. Loved it. All about it. Then they draft De'Ami Brown, one of my favorite picks from this year's draft. This team got better across the board. They bring back Eric Flowers, too, who was fantastic for him a couple years ago. Don't know where he's going to play, how he fits, but nonetheless, this team got better. Fantastic offseason. They positioned themselves, just like the Giants here up at the top, to win the NFC East. But that is going to do it for my updated tier ranking of the offseason for each team in the NFL. Comment down below where I was right, where I was wrong, who your favorite team is, where you have them on this scale. Who do you think the overall winner of the offseason so far is? I'm eager to hear what you have to say. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. It'll help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want more sports content in your life, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off. I'm part of the last generation that remembers time of God.